GracePointe Healthcare, modern medicine, the old-fashioned way. What an off-season it has been, everybody. Hopefully you had a good summer, and hopefully this year hasn't been too crazy for you. The world, of course, taken by storm with COVID-19 and everything that's been going down. Of course, it affected us because we usually start second weekend of July, but with everything being pushed back in the unsure nature of the season, we're now here. We're first show back. It's really good to be back. I was talking to James earlier, and it was about 9 months that we haven't had a radio show, and usually it's about 7 months. So I'm a little rusty here. So bear with me. And James is actually, for those of you who don't follow him on social media, James is a coach for a softball team up in White House. So he is not able to be with us today. He'll be back full swing next week. So it's a one-man show today for me, Spencer Tomset. Glad to have everybody here on the show. Everybody tuning in wherever you are, either podcasting this afterwards or here for the live experience. Like I said, crazy times that we've had. Obviously, a lot of updates that I'm going to recap with you all from the off season. Obviously, the big story with coronavirus and everything, essentially the world shutting down back in March, and the timeline has been interesting because of schools shutting down. I know personally for me with MTSU, I was in Pensacola on spring break, and midweek, right when the World Health Organization declared coronavirus a pandemic, once we were in that situation, once we got to that situation, it was immediate email within at least a day or two from the university president saying we're extending spring break so that our faculty can convert everything to remote instruction and everything. And I know a lot of other universities and colleges across the nation have had to deal with that. So it's hats off to all the education administrators who had to suddenly adapt to that change and adjust everything to be able to just to get everything ready to go. It's been interesting this off season. I've at least personally for me, I've been on a few vacations. Been traveling a little bit. Of course, social distancing during those travels and wearing a mask and everything. But it's been interesting. But enough about coronavirus. That's enough on the news already. We're here to talk about A-band football. So again, James is out today. We will see him next week. He'll be back on the show full swing, and we'll be getting you fully ready for the season. Today we're just going to talk a little bit about the off season and just recap some of the big highlight stories that, of course, I've talked about. Of course, talked about it early on. I've renewed my contract officially. Well, contract in quotation marks with A-Man Extreme. Renewed that for the 2020 season. Fortunate enough to have Eight-Man Extreme as a big part of my broadcasting career and big part in the early grounds. Really excited, and especially getting more promotion to MTAC Insider to be able to deal directly with those in the Middle Tennessee Athletic Conference Board, be able to talk to coaches more in depth, talk to them about different situations, and of course break the news first before anybody else, especially when it's most important. And that's come in pretty handy with everything that's gone on in the off season. Of course, with the developments in March and everything that's gone down, it's come in pretty handy to be able to have that inside information and get that first before anybody else. We'll start with the first story we heard back in December. We were made aware of this. We decided to, as we usually do, December, we, for the most part, take off on social media, but that's changing, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But at least last year, we decided to take off December. No social media posts, nothing, because of how crazy the season is, just because of that de-stressor time. And during that, St. Andrew Swanee, the Mountain Lions, just about 30, 45 minutes away from the Webb School in Bell Buckle, they decided to shut down their football operations. Very unfortunate. The school made the decision, and it was one of those things where the writing was on the wall, per se, because 2017 they had an incredible season. Of course, didn't get into the playoffs by a coin flip. And then 2018 and 2019, both losing seasons, and they almost got one game won in 2000. I'm trying to remember. It was 2018, I believe, against the Tennessee Heat. It was either they lost in overtime or the Heat lost in overtime, one of the two. But close game that they did lose that game. I'm just now remembering it. But St. Andrews Sewanee losing a heartbreaking game in 2018 to at least get one win on their season. Then 2019 had to cancel several games. We were only able to cover their one game against Franklin Classical School. And just for them were two losing seasons, and then to get that win in the MTAC Bowl in 2017 and not go to the playoffs after having one loss, the administration just made the decision to drop out of 8-man football. Sad to see him go. We always had the pleasure of going down to Sewanee and covering the players and everything, especially with St. Andrews Sewanee being a boarding school. I believe it was last year they had players combined for 8 to 9 different countries represented on their team, just from all the distant people coming from there, from all over. And it's the same thing with the Webb School. Of course, they weren't in 8-man football last year, but to see that sort of cultural diversity, to see that on a football team was incredible. And that was the difficulty that Coach Hargis had every season as well, with some of those boarding school students coming in and never playing football a day in their life, and having to go right back to the basics and having to go right back and teach them the game of football. It was always a challenge, but Hargis managed to put together some decent players. Guys like Kalen McLean, I believe he was an all-star last year. Seeing some other guys over the years, of course, Dustin Stensby, who's now moved on into his college career. But a lot of great football guys came from St. Andrews Sewanee. It's a really competitive team down there. Really fantastic. It's fantastic. Sad to see them go. I don't know what the latest word is. I heard that there was some word about a potential co-op with Riverside Christian, but I don't believe anything ever officially came of that. And that was in discussions, and then St. Andrews Sewanee decided to co-op with another 11-man school down towards that area. I can't remember which one, but they decided to do a co-op there. So school making that decision, but so that happened in December. St. Andrews Sewanee dropping out. Wish them all the best. Sad to see Coach Hargis go. We always loved interacting with him and the great conversations he brought. But of course, that's one less team in the MTAC South. So that happened in December. We knew about that, and we held off on reporting it until January, February, and that was officially when I started. I believe that was my first tweet. It was either that or some other coaching change. That was my first tweet. Just made aware Grundy County is who they combined with. St. Andrews Sewanee is co-opted with Grundy County. So that was a first tweet that I did, was with St. Andrews Sewanee officially shutting down their football operations, at least the first under the new MTAC insider role. And there was one other coaching change that revolved around that time. But getting into that, so January, I was giving back some piece of equipment to James, or either that or some shirt that he left at my house. He was in the area on a job, and he decided to stop by my house, and that was the same weekend as the All-American game. This will have to be a story for another time, but I'm sure James and I, on maybe another episode of Extreme Talk this season, if it comes back, I would love to go into the stories of our experience with the All-American game, just to give people an insight to our perspective, because I know a lot of people were frustrated with the way that the All-American game was coordinated in the last 2 years, in 2019 and 2020, and just the way everything went down. But I'm sure we'll go over that at some point. But 2020 rolls around. We get into January, into the new year. James is at my house for some equipment thing I was giving him, and so we start talking, and he mentions to me, I was standing in my driveway. He still had his car running in my driveway, and I was just having a conversation with him, and he mentioned that the original person who coordinated the All American games for the USFA, he got up and left on after the first day of the All American game practices. He got up and left, and he just sent an email to the manager there, is either manager or assistant manager for Rocky Top Sportsplex, and he sent an email and said, "I'm done. I'm walking out. I'm not doing this anymore." And of course, kudos to the assistant manager there. He immediately read that email and said, "We could still do this game. We could still coordinate it, and we could still get it done." So he decided to still have the game, told the coaches what was going on and everything. And when James is telling me this, that the guy just got up and left, several phone calls to James said, "Hey, you're going to get a call from the Rocky Top Sportsplex staff member. You're going to get a call from him because he's going to ask about you guys broadcasting the game." And sure enough, after we got that notice, in that same span of time, he called James and said the major question we're getting from a lot of parents and a lot of players and families: where's the broadcast? Who's going to broadcast it? And so we talked a little bit. We worked some things out, and we on short notice we agreed. So we went 2 hours, 2.5 hours. We picked up Matthew Bowden, former Lancaster Christian Academy player, just to help us with camera. And James and I decided to go out there. We stopped at a hotel in Crossville, and next morning we woke up and headed to the game. They fortunately, thankful to the coaches for this working out, they pushed back the game about a half hour, an hour for us, so that we had enough time to set up our equipment, make sure everything was correct, and just make sure everything was running smoothly and ready to go for the broadcast. They fortunately delayed the start times of both the 8-man and 11-man games to accommodate for us. We're very thankful for that. And we ended up broadcasting both of the games. Fortunately, James had some familiarity with the 11-man guys because a decent amount of those players were in the NHSA 11-man tournament that James went down to cover. I'm sure you'd be telling this story right now if you were able to, but he so when we were calling the national championship, or we were there for the 3 games that were occurring, in between the games, James and Hank St. Dennis had a conversation about he didn't have a PA guy handy for the 11-man tournament. He said, "You want to do it? I can cover some things." And so James, after we got back from Florida, basically it was a get back, turn around, next day or in 2 days go right back down there and handle the PA announcing for the 11-man games. So fortunately, that kind of worked out because the 8-man games, I mean, we knew a decent amount of the guys. A lot of them, of course, were from the MTAC, and there's some guys from Evangel, and there's some guys from 8-man teams around the region that had been selected. So we knew a decent amount of the players in the 8-man game. But the 11-man game, I just had a roster. I had player numbers, and I just stuck to play-by-play and calling what I saw because I did not know it or have enough. I did not have enough prep time for those players because of 24 hours notice or less to be able to call that 11-man All-American game. And but it was a fun experience. It was good to be kind of spontaneous and go out to Gatlinburg to go call these games again and be back there. And of course, we haven't worked out the official details yet, but we will be broadcasting the 8-man and 11-man All-American games. And that's the reason I say about December is because they have moved the All-American games from January to December. They did a survey with coaches and players and parents, and because of the timing of the basketball schedule and because of the timing of everything with at least the All-American games, they determined that it was better to have the game in December than it was in January, just because of basketball and instead of right after the new year where everything's going on and all of that. So so that's at least my perspective on the All American Games story. We had to suddenly go out there, and we were driving back from from that game, and James just we we of course figured out. We talked a little bit with the coordinator out there after the game, and asked him about some stuff like what happened and all that. And it was interesting. But of course, the quote that still rang with me, because that was literally the first weekend of 2020, and James told me, "What a way to ring in the new year, huh?" It's very not knowing what was ahead. This whole 2020 has just been very very interesting. So the All American games happened, and then everything else was really quiet until then. For the first time, the MTAC scheduling meeting was held in March 2019. It was held in February. They decided to move it until March, which, of course, I believe that was the smartest move they could do. Of course, the reasoning that was given for moving it is because schools didn't know if they were going to have a team because of re-enrollment. So I think it was a very smart move for them to do that. So that way they give schools after enrollment, they know how many kids are going to be there. They know how many people are going to be interested in football. Gives them enough time to have some informational meetings and possibly conditioning workouts and all that. So the scheduling meeting occurred. And I've got my tweet threads up here. I wish I had brought in my physical notes just to jog my memory on all the specific stuff that was talked about in the scheduling meeting. But for those of you who don't already follow me on Twitter, feel free to, if you have one, or you can go to my Facebook page under the same name, Spencer Tomset, or Instagram, and I update them all anytime I've got MTAG news. It has everything up there, and then 8 Man Extreme reshares it. So you can follow both of those, of course. But fortunately, 2019 we were not allowed to go to the scheduling meeting, but the league president did call us afterwards and gave us all the important updates that were from there. But this year we were allowed to go to the scheduling meeting in 2020 after they had their initial meeting of talking about changes and everything. So for those of you who did not attend the schedule meeting or see my updates back in March, I'll get you updated here. So everything that was updated. So the biggest update, the biggest story is that Division II is back. The Middle Tennessee Athletic Conference has made the decision to bring back Division II, but it is not structured in the way the TSSAA structures it, where you go by roster size and then group schools based on what numbers they have. It is Division II is essentially the it's essentially just lack of a better term. I'm trying to think of a better way to put this, but it's essentially a losers bracket. For those teams that do not have a positive record, or those who have essentially low records in Division One. Division One is the winning teams. Division Two is the losing teams, and it's the way it was structured at the scheduling meeting prior to all of this, and again going in order of all the stuff that's happened in the offseason. So originally what it was is the bottom 5 teams, which are the number 4 and number 5 seeds in the North and number 4, 5, and 6 seeds in the South, were going to be in a playoff bracket. And because of the uneven number of teams in the division, they were going to decide who gets a first round bye through a coin toss. We know MTAC likes their coin tosses. The games were set to be at the same time as Division One on Friday nights with playoffs, and Division Two championship before Division One, and we'll get to all those changes in a second. Yeah, but Division Two is back. I'm sure James would of course have a lot to say about his opinions on that. We'll maybe get into that later in the season, but it's interesting that they're bringing it back. And the reasoning, of course, that was given from MTAC sources is that they're wanting to keep teams motivated to play for something. And they're wanting to keep every team, no matter how many losses they have, they say you could still call yourself a state champion. And this is where it gets into opinion. One of the difficulties of that is you have a team that's 1-3 in division, or on their season they may have only gotten one game won, and if they just win a handful of games, they can call themselves a state champion even though they're potentially under 500. So that's a hypothetical that a team could say they're they're state champions, but they're under 500. So it gets difficult in that type of interpretation. And at the same time, they won the Division II bracket. They won the Division II tournament structure, and yeah, they could call themselves Division II champions, but the majority of players and people associated with that team, I don't think anyone's going to say Division II champion, because then that brings up the conversation of people. What does it mean Division II? How is it structured? Most people will just say we're state champions, but then those of us at least over here, we know what Division II means. But I think it's interesting. I think you always want to give opportunity to players and give them a motivation to play for something. Of course, and of course the reason they didn't go for an all conference bracket is because they're wanting to not intrude on basketball, which getting to that later on, they're already intruding on basketball by a week now because of the situation happening. And granted, they didn't want to intrude on basketball prior to all of the coronavirus news coming out and everything having to go down with that. But Division II is back. Christian Community is hosting both the Division I and Division II championships. So the MTAC 8-man football championships will be hosted on a 40 by 80 field. 40 by 80 field for the second time in 3 years. Of course, the CCS hosted the championship, the conference championship back in 2018. And prior to that, every one of the MTAC championships, I think there may have been one or two, but the majority of the MTAC championships have been hosted on a 50 by 100 field. But the way that MTAC is doing it is that they're right now swapping between the North and South hosting it. There have been talks of possibly having the MTAC championship hosted at Bethel University or hosting it at University of the South. In the past, we've heard all of those situations. But this season, the conference has opted not to do that. They're opting to have a member school host it, which I think it's again, getting into opinion here. So those are the facts. The opinion on CCS hosting the championship. It's a great environment. CCS is great. 2018, when we had that championship there, obviously their concession stand is one of the highest standard concession stands in MTAC. They have full fryers there to make French fries. They've got Philly cheesesteaks cooking and everything there. It's a fantastic venue. It's into opinion wise, I just wonder why MTAC has not considered having the championship hosted at a kind of more neutral site. And here's what I mean by that. You can't determine who's going to be in the championship preseason. That's guaranteed, and that's why they've looked into hosting it at a college with the University of the South or Bethel University, so it's a neutral site. But with hosting it at Ezel Harding or CCS, and again, both venues, fantastic in my opinion, fantastic places to host it. The issue is home field advantage. With how it's been the last few years. Obviously, 2017, the Webb School, they were expected to go to the championship. They didn't, and they had a home field advantage for the consolation. They had a home field advantage for the consolation game. 2018 CCS, they were originally planning on University of the South to host the championship, and then last second, because the deal's falling through, they had to move it to CCS, and then CCS won the championship on their home turf. And then last year, Ezel Harding, it was supposed to be at Bethel. Then Ezel Harding confirmed several weeks beforehand that they were hosting the MTAC championship, and they won it on their home field. So that's where the question comes into play: is when will MTAC consider hosting the championship on a more neutral site on some teams' home turf? I mean, we've suggested Riverside on the show plenty of times, and Riverside every year they have just as chance as anybody to go to the championship, of course. But that's another great venue that MTAC hasn't looked at. But at least as of now, they're looking into colleges to host it. But as it stands, they're rotating between one North team to host it and one South team to host it. So CCS will host both the Division I and Division II championships. Originally, it was on November 14th, but they pushed it back, and we'll get into that. The other updates, of course, Providence Christian is back. They're making their debut in varsity 8-man football. They've been in middle school 8-man football, regulated sometimes under MTAC because sometimes they've officially regulated middle school and had a championship under there, sometimes not. But PCA has always had as far back as I can remember, they've always had a middle school team down there. So they're officially moving to varsity. Last year, they were at the scheduling meeting. They thought they were going to go into it, and they just decided last second. Well, not last second. It was prior to the league deadline of canceling the season. They mentioned we're not going to have a season this year. We just don't have it. And then Coach LeBron Ferguson came into the mix. I believe he was from Franklin Road Christian School, I think. I believe he either came from there or FRA. Is one of the two. But I've had good interactions with him. Met him at the scheduling meeting and everything. We'll definitely get him on the show at some point. But he got hired by Providence Christian to be their new football coach, and varsity is in full swing for that. And of course, Sacred Heart is back. Obviously, 2019 they didn't have enough people to host it. So it's going to be Sacred Heart. We're definitely going to go back down there for the season. Jeremy Blankenship is the new coach over there. He's been an assistant coach on the roster. He's been in the mix with Sacred Heart for a little bit. So it's really going to be great to see Sacred Heart again, see them back into the swing with 8-man football. Of course, Providence Christian, new school. It's always great to see more schools make the move to 8-man football and to give their varsity players more opportunity towards potentially pursuing a football career. And Providence Christian, for many, many years, they've always been a high-profile basketball school. They've always been successful in the TSSAA. I had the pleasure of calling several of their basketball games, of course, when I was still attending FCA, and just seeing the high quality of competition and the dedication they put in to their basketball program. I know it's going to translate over to it's definitely going to translate over to their football program. And from the talks I've had with Coach Ferguson, it's looking like it's going to be a decent year. And then we'll get into that about their first season and how that's going to look out. So all MTAC teams, they have to play one game against their division opponents and 2 interdivisional games. That was decided back in March, is regulated. They have to have a minimum that brings a minimum of 6 games for each of the North teams, 7 games for the South, and of course the tiebreakers remain the same on in-division, then head-to-head, then coin toss. Still hoping that they can add a deeper layer to that to make it more unlikely that it'd be forced to a coin toss. However, that's a conversation for another time. As I gave with the updates, originally they added a bye week between the regular season and the postseason to avoid the conflict of the ACT and SAT testing weekend in the last few years. And the last day of play was supposed to be October 16th and ended up being October 30th. And they originally announced a fall sports banquet to honor players from all fall sports, but likely because of the coronavirus, they won't have it. I haven't heard of an official update on that, but more than likely we won't see that happen this year. Maybe next year. We'll see how it goes down. Those are all the scheduling updates. The other big thing is that all schools, they are required to report their scores to the conference within 24 hours of the game's conclusion, or there's a penalty. I haven't seen a copy of the 2020 bylaws, but I would assume it's a monetary fine for the members. But within 24 hours of the game's conclusion, that kind of gives a decent segue into schools either using the Tennessee High School Football app or at least reporting their scores or stats on Max Preps. I've said it on the show. James has said it on the show. We believe it should be time for MTAC to regulate that every school uses Max Preps, or at least the conference uses some uniform website or some uniform service to report their statistics and their scores and schedules and all that stuff. We believe that that would be a great tool, not just for us to be able to do well at our job and know the facts, but in comparison to other high schools around the nation that report their stats and game results and all of that, gives them an opportunity to just see their players comparing with other people, and for colleges that are looking as well, they can look at those stats, look at the players and everything, and I think it is possibly time for that. I don't think we'll see it this season, maybe next season, but those are so that's the general stuff that was from my thread from the MTAC scheduling meeting. And then, of course, back on July 23rd, within the last 10, 20 days, I had a lengthy conversation with several league sources about the season and just with the scheduling meeting and such. So, obviously, this thread was before Governor Lee signed Executive Order Number 55, saying the schools can start on time. This was before any of that was signed. But actually, before I get into that, let me mention one other thing that happened this season. Of course, excited to see Sacred Heart back. Excited to see Providence start their season. But Bowling Green Christian Academy, they, of course, announced that they are combining schools. Give me 1 second to make sure I get the right name on this. It's Legacy Christian. It's going to be Legacy Christian Academy at Bowling Green. But their school is combining with, I want to make sure I get this right. Scroll back here. Their school will combine with, make sure I get this right here. Anchored Christian Academy, that's it. So that was back June 22nd is when I reported that and when it was officially announced. But Anchored Christian Academy and Bowling Green Christian, they decided to combine, and it will now be the Legacy Christian Academy of Bowling Green Eagles. But because of that, there was actually an update that was given later with that combination. Bowling Green Christian Academy gave an update. They said the Warriors are now known as the Bowling Green Warriors without a formal school affiliation and will play this coming season as a high school level club team. And direct quote from the assistant coach of the Warriors, Todd Allison, said, "Right now we're keeping options open with the focus on having a team, building a program for the players, and really playing some competitive football for high school athletes that are looking for that opportunity that they might not have or may be delayed in having with their normal school." It also says on this release, as a club team, the Warriors offer a potential alternative to players at area schools who may not choose or be able to compete for their own school's program. The Warriors have traditionally been a mix of mostly homeschool and public school students eager to compete in a team sport. So because of that, because of the school officially, because of there being no school affiliation, and mostly the reason for that is because they couldn't. It was because of how sudden the official merger was in the organization. There have been talks about it for several months, but because of it becoming official in late June, jersey ordering would have been a nightmare. It just would have been a nightmare for them to suddenly get the numbers, get the jerseys, get everything properly ordered. So they just could not have an affiliation with the school. Between that and getting approval from the higher-ups at Legacy Christian Academy, between all of that, it was just in a month, in order to get the jerseys and the practice gear and everything. Coach Don Brown is still coaching the Bowling Green Warriors, and hopefully assuming that they become the Legacy Christian Academy at Bowling Green Eagles, hoping that he'll still be with the team. Assuming that'll be next year. This is supposedly a 1-year club situation, but Coach Brown did contact MTAC and said, I'm not able to have a affiliation with the school, and because of that, and per the MTAC bylaws, I believe those are updated for 2020, but we have not received a copy of them yet. But per the MTAC bylaws, it's that you have to have an affiliation with the school. That's at least what it is to my knowledge. But because of Bowling Green Warriors being a club team, they are not eligible for MTAC play. So because of that conversion, because of that going over, it is just the Bowling Green Warriors this season. They will be a club team. We've got a schedule for them. They're playing several MTAC teams, and it's looking like a good schedule from what I've looked over. And they're just not playoff eligible. They're not going to be going for the MTAC championship or any of that. It's a situation similar as the Tennessee Heats. So that's what we're looking at. And also, so before Executive Order 55 was signed, MTAC's Plan B was September 18th being the official target start date for the season. So that has changed in that MTAC is still following out with Plan B and telling coaches that their target start date should be September 18th. However, they are allowing member schools to schedule games before then. Their September 18th is just their official first day of play per se, which I don't know if I think it's that they're focusing on division games. I think September 18th forward is when their division games can happen, but they're allowing member schools to schedule games before that date. So with that, that's also part of Lancaster Christian Academy releasing their schedule, and I'll get into that in a second. But yeah, so they're going with their Plan B to focus on in-division games. The final day of the regular season for playoff implicated games is October 30th, and I believe that is tentative to somebody could flex a game to October 31st on that Saturday, which is Halloween. Especially with recent developments about schools wanting to get more Thursday and Saturday games. As I mentioned, it's the Bowling Green Warriors because of the school merger. And also, with that development with Bowling Green, MTAC is not moving Ezel Harding to the north this season. This season, it will be 4 teams in the north, 6 teams in the south, and they are waiting to see if Legacy Christian Academy decides to join the conference because it would reduce the headache of moving Ezel to the north for one season, having it 5-5, reduce that headache of if Legacy Christian says we want to join in, then having to move teams back around and restructure everything. It just didn't make sense for them for one season. So I've been talking for about 42 minutes. Thank you all for sticking with me. So MTAC, they decided not to move Ezel Harding. So the 4th place in the North goes into Division 2, and the bottom 2 teams for the South are supposed to be in Division 2. But it's explained in the further situation that I mentioned here. Providence Christian Academy, they will not participate in the MTAC playoffs in high school nor middle school due to an ineligible player. However, Providence did come forward at the start. They came forward and said this player's ineligible because of this. I didn't get an official quote from Coach Ferguson on this yet. MTAC declined to comment any further than saying that Providence came forward and they said they have an ineligible player, and because of that they accepted the consequences of not being able to participate in the postseason, but they are going to do their regular season. And like I said, Providence's middle school team also isn't playoff bound. So right now, there's no decision on how Division II is going to work out because, or at least how the playoff structure is going to look, because with it being the 4th team in the North and the bottom 2 teams in the South, that's only 3 teams in Division II. So they haven't decided how that playoff thing will be structured. And I mentioned on my tweet, my opinion was that with only 3 teams eligible, it seems likely that the best of the 3 will get a bye into the Division II championship, and the remaining 2 will have a play-in game the week prior. But the issue, this is where it gets into opinion again. So only 3 teams in Division II this year. My opinion, don't have Division II. Because with only 3 teams, you're going to have 1 team going to the championship, unless you do a sort of round-robin situation. At the end of the day, it's going to be someone's going to get a week vacation. Someone's going to get a bye week in that, because you can't have unless you do what the NHSA did unless you do what they did with the 5 teams in the national championship, where you had the 12-minute quarters thing, or not the 12-minute quarters. It was I believe 15-minute halves or something similar to that. The condensed games that are back-to-back. Unless you have those condensed games and you do a sort of round-robin thing where each team faces each other and that stuff, someone's going to get a break. Someone's going to get a bye week. And it seems to me, and because it's only 3 teams, you can't necessarily have 3 rounds of the Division II playoffs. I just don't see that happening, at least to where it's not a massive headache and people don't understand what's going on. So in my opinion, I think hold off on Division II. I think wait until next season to see how it goes when you have more teams that are on board and more teams to figure out that situation, and then go into it. Still have the 16 playoff for for the year and still have 16 playoff for Division 1, but reevaluate with Division 2 going into next season just because of everything that's going on. That's solely my opinion, of course. Maybe James or anybody else listening, you guys probably have your other opinions. Definitely let us know in the comments or on social media. But I just think that Division 2, I don't think it's viable this year with only 3 teams, especially when those are, like I mentioned earlier, with the bottom teams in the conference. You have a bottom team that is essentially the best of the worst. You're having them with a bye week into the championship, assuming that's the way it would work out. But who knows? Maybe MTAC has something else cooking on a better way that is more viable, and it's more in that situation. I don't know, but I'm hoping that we get some more clear answer on that. But in my opinion, I think Division 2 should just be held off on just for this year, and then reevaluate it going into next season to where it's more viable. So I tweeted this saying, in line with schedule changes and pending Governor Lee's updates, the playoffs for Division 1 are set to be on Fridays and Saturday for Division 2, except the championships for Division 1 and Division 2 are both on November 21st, and they're just Division 2 is first and Division 1 later in the night. So if Division 2 is on Saturdays, they're likely the playoff games are going to be the same exact time. Again, I don't know how Division 2 is going to work out in that. Division 1, since they're on Fridays, more than likely they're going to be at the same time unless some schools have to push it back because of the weather, which that fortunately worked out last year to where South Haven and Riverside played on Thursday to get ahead of the storms that were coming in. And then Friday it was Bowling Green and Lancaster in the rain where barely anybody was in the stands. But the sources that I talked to, coaches and teams need a 3-week minimum of contact practice before they play their first game. So anyways, MTAC's official plan for COVID-19, each school is required by 4 p.m. on game day to temperature check every player, every coach, every crew member, everyone traveling with the team before they leave. The athletic director has to sign off on those temperature checks and submit it to the other athletic director in a confirmation that everybody is healthy. That's the conference mandate. I think it's what you have to do. It's a good idea. Just make sure to ensure everybody's safety, and that gets it out of the way. I mentioned this. The temperature check for referees, fans, and media is conducted by the game administrator and/or staff on site. MTAC is leaving it up to each of the member schools about how to proceed with social distancing and concessions. And of course, Governor Lee's executive order came out that schools are supposed to follow the TSSAA rulings, and in those bylaws or in that COVID-19 procedure, TSSAA recommends is saying everyone has to wear a mask going to a game. Seating measures need to be put in place for social distancing. Seating measures need to be put in place for social distancing to separate people 6 feet apart. And the TSSAA highly recommends against concessions, but if you're going to do concessions, you need to have it in a way where you don't have to handle cash. I believe there was some policy in there about those who are operating concessions need to wear gloves and masks, obviously, and not use the same gloves, basically to keep it sanitized. One of the interesting things that I looked at is that it's per the TSSAA policies, it's up to member schools on who they allow in the press box. It depends on who they allow in the press box. I know that some state organizations have done some other mandates and such on that. As far as we are aware, it's a per school situation. We haven't been given any official word from MTAC in this regard. But as far as we're aware, we're going to be doing our part to help encourage people to socially distance by trying to cover as many games as we possibly can. Because with the social distancing measures in place, obviously Friday Night Lights, there's nothing like it. There's nothing you could do to replace Friday Night Lights, the experience, the fandom in there, the intensity inside of the arena. You can't replace that. But for those of you who are, of course, concerned about your health or your relatives' health or family members' health, we're doing what we can by being at games, broadcasting them so you can socially distance and watch the game in the comfort of your own home and get excited about it. And I'll get in. Brings me perfectly into my next thing here. MTAC is looking to highly recommend that member schools move some games to Thursday, Saturday. Per sources I've talked to, many schools are starting to schedule on Thursday, Saturdays. Not just because of the social distancing, not just because of the exposure to players, but another element is the referees, the officials. Because the amount of games, if you have a whole bunch of games scheduled on Friday night, you have all those people. You have them gathered together on Friday night with the officials, and you have them all going to games at the same time. If you don't spread them out, the issue, at least that I've had in conversations with the officiating coordinator, Ronnie Perkins, conversations I've had is that he wants to set up each of his crews for success and have some veterans mixed in with some new guys, so that way you mix them in, you have people training from the best as well as the new guys getting good reps in. And if you have everyone in the schools playing on a Friday night, then that gets difficult to where you lose consistency. You lose the chance to give officials training, and you have some of your best guys going to certain places, and it gets difficult there. So specifically on the officiating side, it was requested that more games be on Thursday, Saturday for the training purposes, and in case of one or several of their members is exposed to COVID and has to quarantine for 14 days, you have all those games on Friday night, you're going to have a shortage of officials. And there's already, I think the TSSAA had 20-something officials opt out of participating this season. So with that being said, I don't know how many have officially opted out from the organization, the Mid-State Officials Association is what Ronnie runs. I don't know how many have opted out for the season. As far as I'm aware, they're all still on board. But the question comes into play with that shortage. If you have somebody who is positive for COVID-19 and has to quarantine for 14 days, you have several officials from one crew that have to quarantine, and you have all those games on Friday night, then you're going to have a problem. So that's a big part of it. But more games Thursday, Saturday. Again, we're going to do our part to try and get to as many of those as we can to broadcast for people, encourage social distancing. We're going to try our best to do our part, and we're going to be releasing a policy in the next few weeks that we're going to be sending to schools. Well, not policy, but guidelines of what steps we're taking to make sure we're helping prevent the spread of the virus, and what steps we're taking to make sure that we're properly social distancing and being more part of the solution than the problem. And we're gonna release that in the coming weeks. James and I have to get together and map out the specific policies, but we're gonna release that in the coming weeks, so that way not just the schools know, who are the primary ones, the athletic directors and administrators know, but so the fans know what we're doing to not only help you guys to stay in your homes and to watch the games from afar, but to also help to give these kids the exposure they deserve. There was discussion earlier in the year about mandating the width of every member school's playing field be 40 yards. That mandate's not going to be instituted this year. It'll be re-examined once schools have the time to discuss their measurements and plan out for specific venues and all that stuff. So according to this tweet is outdated. According to the Christian community originally said they were going to host their jamboree on September 11th through 12th, but per the Lancaster Christian Academy schedule that was just released a few days ago, the jamboree is supposed to be on August 22nd. More than likely, it's going to be the same situation as last year on August 21st and 22nd, where 21st and 22nd, where they have the teams split up for whoever they play. So that's up there. That tweet was originally what I was told, September 11th to 12th. Now it's going to be August 21st to 22nd. So we'll be there. We'll be doing social media posts as we usually do, and talking about the teams. We'll recap the jamboree on the Sunday afterwards. All of that. The tweet on July 23rd said the schedules are supposed to be released within the next week or two. Apparently, they're still adjusting. They're moving games to Thursday and Saturday. They're moving them around. So we're waiting on the next update. And after Governor Lee's executive order, from what I've been told, they're still sticking with Plan B. So they're still sticking with that September 18th date, like I said. The other thing to talk about is that the Tennessee Heat is still independent. The decision has been kind of it's been different for other schools. Like as you saw last year, Sacred Heart ended up withdrawing from the season, and then they decided to come back. Providence was originally in last year. They decided to go out, and now they're in. Several member schools have decided to go out of the conference and then come back in. And it's just an interesting note because the Tennessee Heat, they're still an independent organization, and to my knowledge, because of the ruling that was on the Bowling Green Warriors about them not being affiliated with the school, I guess the Tennessee Heat is not eligible to be in MTAC play anymore. Which again, we haven't received a copy of the 2020 MTAC bylaws. We of course would love to see those and know what the new rule changes are in terms of eligibility and rule sets and all that. But as it stands, Tennessee Heat is still independent. So we announced it. We kind of leaked it in the off season. James posted something about it on a game we did with them. But we are officially adding the Freedom Cowboys to our list of teams that we cover. We're excited to make them the first organization or the first team that we're covering that is based in Alabama. Of course, we talk about the Evangel Christian School Lightning, and we went down there for the first time last year and covered their game against Ezel Harding, which ended up being a preview, being the first matchup of 2 on the season. It ended up being a preview for the national championship. But we're adding the Huntsville-based Freedom Cowboys to our regular lineup. We're gonna look at their schedule and try to get 1 or 2 games in there. We're definitely hoping to get down to Freedom this year, go down to Alabama, and do a broadcast from there. Obviously, there's a lot of questions about that because of the coronavirus and potential quarantining situations. I know. I was talking to Coach Don Brown, and they're pending right now on if they're going to have to reschedule their game against the Freedom Cowboys. That's supposed to be their season opener on September 11th, but they're pending because the Kentucky governor. There's currently a rule in place. It's a 2-week self-quarantine if a state has, I believe, a 15% or more infection rate, which Alabama does. Right now, if Alabama's numbers don't get better, or if Bowling Green changes their Kentucky doesn't change their restrictions, then they may have to reschedule that opening game on September 11th. So it's still it's up there. It depends on the governor's travel restriction if it's still in effect, and if Alabama's rate is higher than 15% infection rate, they may move that to a home game. So that's up in the air. But at least for us, as far as I'm aware, there's no travel restrictions down to Alabama for Tennesseans. I know that mask mandates are in certain counties, and there's some certain restrictions on there, but I don't think it should be a problem for us to travel down there for a broadcast. But regardless, we're excited. We're really excited to go down to Huntsville and cover the Freedom Cowboys. They're a great team. We've had great interactions with them in the past on the road and at the national championship. So we'll be covering them this season. That's about it. That's at least everything to catch you all up on the off season from everything that was on my live tweets and all the stuff that I've recently mentioned. Of course, Lancaster Christian published their schedule. So looking right now, I was talking to James about this before the show. I was talking with some other guys in studio, which I'll get into that in a second. But I was looking at the master schedules we had that were sent to us back in May for MTAC before they decided to, before any of the executive orders were put in on the stay-at-home order and anything was delayed. Full schedule, every team had it blocked out and such. There was a lot of bye weeks. And then post-COVID, right now looking at the schedules I have, every team has at least 1 game filled in on their schedule. But because of teams moving around games and not having anything official, there's a lot of gaps right now that I'm looking at the master schedule. Thank you to the coach that messaged me. The one other important thing, South Haven Christian School decided to make the move. I tweeted about this in the off season. It was about a month or 2 after the scheduling meeting. James Sawyers is the new head coach for the South Haven Christian School Patriots. Jason Zimmerman, he's still going to be involved. He's still an assistant coach. He's on the coaching staff and involved with the team. But James Sawyers will be taking the helm for South Haven. So thank you to the assistant coach who texted me that. I almost forgot about it. So like I said, there's a lot of gaps on the schedules, but once we have all of the schedules mapped out, we're going to try and release that helmet schedule as soon as possible so everybody has access to it. Everyone knows who's playing who. And that way we can also map out our broadcast schedule. And, of course, we'll be announcing those games, the Sunday before of which games we're going to. So we are good so that everybody will be informed. They'll know which game we're broadcasting, all of that. One thing we're really excited about this year is the people we will have on board. So let me start out with we of course want to thank Isaiah Austin for all the work he's done with us over the past 2 seasons. That was the other coaching change. Obviously, big news with Isaiah Austin, now the head coach of the Franklin Classical School Cowboys. Tim Johnson, new coach for Franklin Christian Academy. So a lot of coaching changes being made this offseason. But congratulations to Isaiah Austin on getting that position. We're excited for him. We're really excited to see how he does in his first season. So, with that being said, we have some new faces around 8-Man Extreme that you'll be seeing in the coming weeks. James will actually not be consistently on the broadcast this year. He is going to be with his kids on the weekends, but he will be reporting in for live scoring updates as he did in 2018. He'll be going to some games that we are not present at, and he'll be giving live scoring updates as we did back in 2018. So we're bringing those back, which is pretty exciting. We're excited to announce that it's looking like for our game broadcasts, our color analyst is former player for the Tennessee Heat, Elijah Diaz. I've interacted with him a few times in the past few seasons, not as much. I know James has. He couldn't be here today. He should be on the show and ready to go next week, but we're really excited to have him on board to be able to help analyze the games, and he knows most of the players around MTAC right now. He's able to analyze and see a lot more in-depth things than I will ever be able to, so I'm really excited to have him on board. And we're also excited with several other faces you're going to be seeing around 8-Man Extreme. Several friends of mine, as you guys may or may not go, I attend Middle Tennessee State University. And I'm the current vice president for the National Sports Media Association chapter. And it's basically a student chapter for us to connect with local journalists, sports media professionals, and such around MTSU and connect with people in the national level. So I'm very fortunate to have those connections. So this year we'll be adding on. This is the first year we're going to have a full crew with our broadcast. So we're excited to announce several members coming on board. Zachary Lone is coming in for this season. He's very skilled at what he does. He is really good with analysis and giving you the stats, letting you know about all these things, and they'll come more on the air and into the light going through the season. They'll also be helping behind the scenes with tech work and score reporting, that kind of stuff. But Zachary Lone, Jack Helwig, and Jonathan House, all three of those guys will be coming on board and helping us with game broadcasts. You may see them as swing analysts if Elijah can't make it to a game. You may see them as sideline reporters. We're going to be adding that function this year. We'll be adding sideline guys to the mix. Of course, in a safe and socially distanced way. And like I said, the policies are going to come out in a few weeks from that. But special thanks to those three for coming on board. We're really excited to have them involved with 8-Man Extreme and to see help them continue in their paths to sports media as 8-Man Extreme has done for me the last several years. So we're really excited to have them all on board. Aside from that, like I said, all those updates in the off season, the coaching changes are pretty significant, and basically what we're looking at for the season. So Christian Community has the same coach, Jordan Flanders. Lighthouse Christian School has the same coach with Brian Hollis. South Haven, of course, James Sawyers is the new coach over there. Sacred Heart with their Sacred Heart with their new coach. Make sure I get the appropriate name. I know I mentioned earlier. Jeremy Blankenship, the new coach for Sacred Heart. Ezel Harding, of course, returning as Dustin McGee. FCA, Franklin Christian's new coach, Tim Johnson. Franklin Classical, their new coach, Isaiah Austin. Coach Jason Bragg, returning with Lancaster. Of course, with Providence Christian. LeBron Ferguson is the new coach over there. Travis Creasy still coming back with Riverside. Bowling Green, of course. Don Brown still their coach. And Tennessee Heat with Ryan Scott, and of course adding on the Freedom Cowboys this year. So decent amount of new coaches. We're going to see some different strategies this year. It's going to be interesting, and we're ready to hit the ground running for the 2020 MTAC football season. Of course, with the national championships we're hoping to cover in November, and of course the All-American games in December. So we're really, really excited for all of that. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. That's all we really have for the show today. James will be on the air next week. We're hoping Elijah Diaz will be here as well. And as we get into the weeks, you'll hear from some of the other guys and what they've seen through the season and everything. We're hitting the ground running. Of course, the Jamboree is supposed to be August 21st, August 22nd. And then first slate of games are either going to start on August 14th, or we might have some games start on the 21st or the 28th. Just depends on what we get when all the schedules come in. So that'll wrap it up for the season opener of Extreme Radio presented by GracePointe Healthcare. Go to GracePointeHealthcare.com. Mention you're with 8-Man Extreme when you request your appointment online, and you get $20 off your new patient office visit fee. GracePointe Healthcare, modern medicine the old-fashioned way. Again, James will be back next week. Hopefully we'll have Elijah Diaz, and that should wrap it up. So thanks, everybody, and I know James isn't here to say it, but see ya.